Hey audio, this is Rajiv, and I want to show you a quick tutorial about how to use sidechain compression. In this case, I have a vocal and I have an instrumental over here. And my goal here is to make the instrumental dip in volume or lower in volume every time the vocal plays. And when the vocal is not playing, the instrument is going to rise back up in volume. I can make that happen automatically using a technique called sidechain compression. A lot of people use this in the music realm for the kick drum and the bass to kind of have their own space in the music. So every time the kick plays, the bass instrument kind of goes down. I'm going to use the same technique, but this time it's going to be for vocals and instrumental. So the first question that you want to ask yourself is, what do you want to duck, or what do you want to lower in volume in this sidechain compression? And the answer to that question in this scenario is the instrumental. So I want the instrumental to dip in volume every time the vocal plays. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the compressor on the instrumental. So I'm going to go to our standard Dyne 3 compressor / limiter over here. Now on this, you have to make a couple of settings. So you have to activate the sidechain by clicking this key button over here, and then you have to choose a key input. And in this case, I'm just going to choose bus 1. So this means that anything being sent to bus 1 is going to trigger this compressor to gain reduce or start compressing. So I'm going to send the vocal to this compressor even though it's on the instrumental track. And in order to do that, I have to go to my sends and then go to the corresponding bus that I chose, so bus 1. So in this case, I should be set to go. So if I turn this up to 0, that means I'm sending the vocal to the compressor to be triggered. And then once the compressor gets triggered on the instrumental starts to duck. So let's see if that's actually happening now, even though I didn't set my compression settings.
Let me tell you all a story. It's a story of how I moved out west.
So you can see the gain reduction meter reacting every time the vocal plays, right? So, but we just need to make this a little bit more smoother. I'm going to make this a little bit drastic so you can see what the difference is.
Let me tell you all a story. It's a story of how I moved out west, or rather, how I was forced to live out here.
So in this case, as soon as a vocal plays, the instrumental is ducking in volume right away almost, right? And that's because our attack setting is really fast. And then when he's done saying what he's saying, the instrumental goes right back up in volume right away. And that's because our release settings is very fast. And it's ducking a lot, like about 12 or 18 dBs because of our ratio and our threshold.
Let me tell you all a story. It's a story of how I moved out west.
Now, let's say I like the amount that it ducks. Maybe I want a little bit less, so maybe I should back off on the ratio actually and back off on the threshold. Let's see if this makes any kind of difference.
I just hung out with a bad crowd. Every now and then, me and my friends would go out and get our hands on some spray paint, maybe tag a few spots around town, but it was never a big deal. When I wasn't tagging, I was...
Okay, it's a little bit better, right? So the only thing is that the compression might be reacting a little bit too fast. So maybe I can slow down the attack time.
Let me tell you all a story. It's a story of how I moved out west, or rather, how I was forced to live out here.
And maybe I don't want the music to come right back up in volume when the narrator is done saying what he's saying. Maybe I want it to kind of rise back up a little bit more smoother, so I can decrease the amount of release here, or actually increase the time, right? Make it slower.
Let me tell you all a story. It's a story of how I moved out west, or rather, how I was forced to live out here.
Right, and I could even make the time even more slower. So right now I can go to about 584 milliseconds. Let's see how this sounds.
Let me tell you all a story. It's a story of how I moved out west, or rather, how I was forced to live out here. It all started...
So if you want to go even slower, you can go
moved
slower.
Out west, or rather, how I was forced to live out here. It all started back in my hometown out on the East Coast. The neighborhood I grew up in wasn't the nicest, and to be honest, I wasn't necessarily the nicest kid either. I mean, it's not like I was out picking fights, I swear. I just hung out with...
So that's a way you can use sidechain compression. It's definitely a useful thing. It's going to, allow the vocals to be in the forefront and the main focal point of your session if you have the instrumental and vocal playing at the same time. But you're definitely going to want to play around with the attack, release, the ratio, and the threshold to kind of get some smoother settings. But I hope this helps, and if you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Thank you.